Okay, what we're going to do now is put this box together, and we're going to fit the bottom to it. And since this is a solid wood panel, we need to leave enough room for expansion and contraction. So I found the best way to do that is just go ahead and do a dry fit. And we're going to put these pieces together just kind of in a dry fashion. Just kind of mash them down close to where they're going to go. Then we're going to measure end to end. And that's going to be 9 7/8. 9 7/8.
So I'm guessing you know how deep your groove is, so you know how much past this line that groove goes to?
What I'm doing is just marking to the far edge of that, pushing against the depth,
Right.
and then giving myself about a 1/8 of an inch on this end.
Okay.
And that's going to give me room to put this box together, and then there's going to be some room for expansion and contraction. There will be minimal expansion and contraction this way. It's all going to come from this way.
So when this is finally cut to size, there will be about a 1/16 of an inch space altogether?
Yes, all the way around.
Okay.
Yes. So what we're going to do now is we're going to plane this board. Get all those saw marks out, the glue joint. See, there's very little glue there because we used the proper amount when we glued this together. Now we're just going to make one pass and clean that up. 2 passes maybe, 3.
Now, how are you gauging your thickness?
Now what I got to do is I've got this pattern.
Uh-huh.
And this pattern is 1/4 of an inch groove. And I'm just going to test it. So a little fat there. So it rides in that. That was cut with that same tool that we used earlier.
Okay.
So I know that's going to be room for this to go through. So now we're going to bring this, one of these edges flat without any saw marks in it.
So this is a similar process to what you started out with when you were making the parts and pieces for the sides of the box.
Exactly the same process. So this is 3 9/16. I'm going to set this to 3 9/16. So now we're going to take this. Mark this down. And that's a little too much to plane. So what we're going to have to do is go to the bench and rip this. You have to be real careful here because this will split if you don't watch it.
Because it's so thin?
Actually, it just
Like
did
that?
It just did that. So the good news is it split on the right side. So we can just continue the cut, being a little more careful so we don't have that to continue. This saw is so aggressive, the way it's sharpened, it's hard to make light cuts like this.
So do you have some saws that are set up for a finer cut?
Yeah.
And some more aggressive?
Yeah. This one's cut up to work around the bench, ripping stuff, and these are more finesse saws. Those, of course, are much even coarser saws. So
Okay.
each saw is made to use for certain specific tasks. Now I'm just going to clean this up. And since I sawed right to my line, that should be 3
You don't want to
9/16.
take anything more off, do you?
Again, just letting the saw cut. I could really push right through that, plow right through that, but just letting the saw do the cut. And it's going to be 9 7/8 of an inch long. And since this is going to go inside the box, I don't bother shooting this. They're pretty square.
You just cut straight to your line and
Straight to the line.
good to go.
Call it done. So, another way of checking this is just kind of bring it up here like this. If you're off on an ordinate amount of room, it kind of shows up.
So you basically know it's only going to shrink a little bit and grow a little bit, and
And it should be good for all 4 seasons. And I'm going to put a little glue on all the tails and pins, just a minute amount of glue.
so you're going to put glue on the inside face of your tails,
Here and here,
just on the outside faces of your tails,
yeah, and there.
and on the miter.
So it's going to be there and there, there and there, and then here. Okay, so this is one.
I've got
You've
one,
got
one and two.
So one goes like this. See, that joint's already swelled.
That's perfect.
And then 4.
There's always that balance between just too loose and too tight, isn't it? And it's only
Yes.
about 1/1000th of an inch.
Yes, and the longer you wait around, the more it's going to swell. So that's 2. That's 2. See how having these numbered really does help when it's crunch time.
And the fact that they're all individually cut, that 3 will not line
They
up
would
with
not fit
would
anywhere
not line
else.
up into that. Oh.
They would not fit anywhere else. And we've got to make sure that's nice and square.
And when you say square, you're talking about the corners at
Diagonals,
90-degree angle.
Yes,
And now's the time to do that, isn't it?
yes. So that's perfect.
Look at those nice tight miter joints there. That's
Yeah, that glue hides a lot of sins, doesn't it? And you can actually increase the look of that just a little bit. I've got something here that mimics the dovetail angle. So if you got a joint like that one that didn't drive up all the
just a
way,
little open.
you can bring that in where it doesn't mess up your... That closes right up. And if you can do these without putting clamps on it, I really like that too. I hate to try to clamp up a 4-sided box. So it looks decent, wouldn't you say?
Oh, that's very good. I mean, and you've got very little twist. It's solid.
See how it sits on the bench.
Nice and flat.
Now that's because we referenced off of this bottom edge every single time we did something, so that keeps things really nice and flat. So we've got to come back, clean this up with a hand plane, top and bottom. There's a minimal amount of work to be done.
Okay. So do you have to wait from the time that you, how much time do you have to wait from the time that you glued up the box to before you start fitting the top?
Well, normally I would wait an hour.
Let the glue get good and set.
Glue get good and set, but sometimes if you only wait an hour and you start really pressing the plane, you can open up a joint a little bit. So I would wait 2 or 3 hours if I were building these on a regular basis, because the glue does need some time to dry. I guess it depends on how hot your shop is, how much humidity is in the air, but I would say a general, excuse me, a general rule of thumb would be a couple hours.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is clean up these dovetails and fit the lid. How's that?
That sounds good.
So we're going to get our number 4 smoothie here, and we're just going to very lightly clean that up.
So you're taking off any of your pencil marks and making the tails and the ends of the pins all flush.
Yes, and this is a process that requires not a real big hurry. So
Nice light cut.
nice, smooth shavings. And I can't go all the way out there because if I do, I'm going to tear that end grain up right there. So I got to turn this box around. Come at it from the other direction.
Now, when you have a different type of wood that has a very pronounced grain pattern, how do you treat this?
If it was cantankerous, I would go back to my sharpening bench. I'd get a super edge on here. And then when I came across here, I'd skew the plane like this just a little bit.
Uh-huh.
So that helps some. And sometimes the wood is just so gnarly, you really can't come right off the plane like you'd like to. So in a case, except for pine, I would come back and use a scraper for that.
Gotcha.
In fact, I'm going to try to scrape this, see if I can scrape some of this pine just for demonstration purposes. Taking just very light shavings. Try to put that down in the vise as much as you can so you don't have any vibration.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to go out as far as I can on that end without tearing out. Kind of smooth that out.
Uh-huh.
So,
And you want to do as little as possible and the same amount around all the corners to keep your miters nice and clean.
nice and clean and square as much as possible. I
That's
would come
great.
back and scrape that. I've worked hard on trying to get a scraper that's sharp enough to scrape pine. I could scrape that, come back with 180 to 220 grit sandpaper, and it's ready for a finish.
So a wood like pine planes nice and easily, but is a little trickier to scrape, and mahogany might be also easy to plane, but a little bit easier on the scraper. Is that what you find?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. To scrape pine, you have to have a razor sharp scraper. And
Well, that's fabulous.
after a few scrapes, it's lost its edge and you're back to sandpaper. So I know that you and I differ just a little bit on this. You don't like to use any sandpaper whatsoever. But in a box like this, if you're just beginning out and your dovetails are a little off, when you come back and you plane this and then you scrape it and you sand it, all those minute indiscretions are hidden forever. Then you come back with 3 or 4 coats of shellac, sand between each coat. That hides it even more so that every good joint looks great.
Mm-hmm.